At 3:07 in the morning, Elena Vasquez sat alone in her corner office on the 42nd floor of Vasquez Technologies, staring at security footage she was never supposed to see. Her finger hovered over the pause button as she watched Marcus Webb, the quiet janitor who'd worked in her building for 18 months, kneel on the polished gym floor beside a small boy. The child's legs were twisted at angles that made Elena's chest tighten with recognition. And Marcus, this man she'd never spoken to beyond a brief nod in passing, was guiding those small limbs through stretches with the precision of someone who'd spent years studying the human body. His hands moved with absolute certainty. His voice, though the footage had no audio, was clearly gentle as he counted repetitions. The boy's face, contorted with effort and pain, held something else too. Trust, complete, unshakable trust in the man who was pushing him through exercises that Elena recognized from another lifetime. From hospital rooms that smelled of antiseptic and broken dreams. Elena's hand shook as she reached for the mouse. She'd pulled up the footage on a hunch, after weeks of noticing small things. The janitor's cart parked outside the executive gym at odd hours. The faint smell of medical ointment in the air. The way Marcus Webb always left the building at exactly 4:15 in the morning, his uniform soaked with sweat that had nothing to do with mopping floors. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. She'd suspected him of stealing equipment, of running some kind of side business, of a dozen things that would give her an excuse to fire someone, anyone, to prove to her board that she was still the ruthless CEO they'd hired 3 years ago. The CEO who'd built Vasquez Technologies from a failing startup into a billion-dollar empire by making hard choices and never letting sentiment cloud her judgment. But this was something she had no framework to process. Elena leaned closer to the screen. The timestamp read 3:14 a.m. Marcus was now supporting the boy in a standing position, one hand on his narrow chest, the other guiding his right leg through a careful range of motion. The child's mouth was open, clearly crying or screaming, but Marcus didn't stop. He kept going with the kind of determined gentleness that came from love mixed with necessity. The kind Elena remembered from the specialists who'd worked with Sophia. Her Sophia, her baby girl who'd smiled through the pain until she couldn't smile anymore. Elena's throat burned. She hadn't cried in 3 years. Not at the funeral, not when she'd donated all of Sophia's toys to charity. Not when she'd moved out of the house she'd shared with her ex-husband and into a sterile penthouse apartment where nothing reminded her of what she'd lost. She'd sealed that grief in a box made of work and ambition, and the cold certainty that feeling anything was too dangerous, that if she started crying, she might never stop. But watching this stranger love his child with the same fierce dedication she'd once had, watching him sacrifice his body and his sleep, and probably every penny he earned to give his son a chance at mobility, something inside Elena's carefully constructed walls began to crack. She clicked to an earlier timestamp, 2:43 a.m. Marcus was arriving, his son asleep on his back in some kind of modified carrier. The boy's head lolled against his father's shoulder, his small body completely relaxed in unconsciousness. Marcus moved through the building's employee entrance with the smooth efficiency of routine, badging in, nodding to the night security guard, heading straight for the service elevator. 2:51 a.m. Marcus was in the gym, having changed his son into shorts and a specialized brace Elena recognized. AFO, ankle-foot orthosis. Sophia had worn the same kind. He was laying out a mat, setting up resistance bands, arranging hand weights in a careful line. His movements were methodical, practiced, the setup of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. 3:02 a.m. The therapy began, and Elena watched, transfixed, as Marcus Webb transformed from invisible janitor into something else entirely. a father fighting for his child's future, a medical professional applying knowledge he clearly possessed, a man who'd made sacrifices Elena could only begin to imagine. She should have stopped watching, should have closed the footage and pretended she'd never seen it. But she couldn't. Because of Marcus Webb's dedication, in the way he counted repetitions and adjusted angles and whispered what were clearly words of encouragement, Elena saw the parent she used to be, the one who'd researched every treatment, who'd driven 8 hours to see specialists, who'd held Sophia through the screaming and the crying and the endless, crushing disappointment of a body that wouldn't cooperate, the one who'd loved so hard it nearly destroyed her when that love wasn't enough. Elena Vasquez had spent 3 years building armor, red power suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent, heels that added 4 inches to her 5'6" frame, blonde hair styled in a sharp bob that required $200 of maintenance every 3 weeks. She ran board meetings like military operations. She delivered quarterly reports with the emotional range of a computer algorithm. She fired underperforming employees without hesitation and negotiated contracts with the ruthlessness of someone who'd learned that mercy was just another word for weakness. Her office reflected this philosophy, floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a backdrop for her success. Minimalist furniture in shades of gray and chrome. Not a single photograph, not one personal item that might suggest she had a life beyond these walls. Even her assistant, Patricia, a competent woman in her 50s who'd worked for Elena since the company's early days, had learned not to ask about weekends or holidays or anything that might breach the professional distance Elena maintained like a force field. The board of directors at Vasquez Technologies had started to whisper, not about her competence, she delivered results consistently, but about her coldness, her inability to connect with employees. The turnover rate in her department was the highest in the company. People lasted 6 months, maybe a year, before transferring to other divisions or leaving entirely. They cited the hostile work environment in exit interviews, the way Elena looked through people instead of at them, how she referred to her team members by their job functions rather than their names, the complete absence of anything resembling empathy or human warmth. Just last week, board member Richard Chen had cornered her after a meeting. "Elena, we need to talk about your leadership style. The company's growing. We need someone who can build teams, not just terrify them into compliance." She'd stared at him with the blank expression she'd perfected. Are the quarterly numbers not sufficient? It's not about the numbers. It's about sustainability. People can't work under that kind of pressure indefinitely. You're burning through talent. Then hire people with higher tolerance for excellence, she'd replied, and walked away. But the conversation had rattled her more than she'd admit, because deep down, beneath the armor and the ice, Elena knew what they really meant. They thought she was broken, and they weren't. Wrong. She'd been different once. Before Sophia. Before the diagnosis that had come 3 months after her daughter's 4th birthday. Before the 2 years of treatments and therapies and hope that kept getting crushed under the weight of reality. Before the night Sophia had slipped away in her sleep, her small hand still clutching the stuffed rabbit Elena had bought her at the hospital gift shop. That Elena, the one who'd laughed and loved and believed the world was fundamentally good, had died in that hospital room. The woman who'd emerged was someone else entirely, someone who understood that attachment led to devastation, that caring meant vulnerability, that the only way to survive was to feel nothing at all. So she'd thrown herself into work. She'd divorced Martin, her husband of 8 years, because watching him grieve reminded her too much of her own pain. She'd sold their house in the suburbs with its backyard swing set and moved into a high-rise where children weren't allowed. She'd changed everything about her life except the company, and the company had thrived under her ruthless attention. Vasquez Technologies had been her father's dream, started in a garage 30 years ago. When he died of a heart attack 5 years back, Elena had taken over a struggling operation hemorrhaging money. Within 2 years, she'd turned it profitable. Within 3, she'd secured contracts with major corporations. Now they were on track to go public next year, which would make Elena a billionaire several times over. But success tasted like ashes. Victory felt hollow. She stood at the top of her industry and felt nothing but the cold wind of isolation. Until 3:07 in the morning, when she watched a janitor love his son with the kind of fierce devotion she'd buried along with her daughter. Marcus Webb had been hired 18 months ago through the standard HR process. Elena barely remembered approving his employment application. She certainly didn't remember interviewing him. He was part of the invisible infrastructure that kept the building running. Someone who cleaned toilets and emptied trash and mopped floors after everyone else went home. She'd passed him in hallways maybe a dozen times. He always stepped aside, eyes down, giving her space. The kind of person who knew his place in the hierarchy and accepted it without question. Or so she'd thought. Now, watching footage from the past 6 weeks that she'd pulled systematically, Elena was seeing someone completely different. Marcus Webb arrived every night at 2:45 a.m. with his son. He worked his shift in compressed bursts of intense efficiency, cleaning 3 floors in the time it should take to clean one. Then, during his official break from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., he conducted what Elena now recognized as a comprehensive physical therapy session with his child. He used the gym equipment with expert knowledge. The resistance bands were positioned at precise angles. The stretches followed, a clear progression. He'd even jury-rigged a standing frame using gym equipment, something that should have cost thousands of dollars, but he'd created from free weights and elastic bands and what looked like parts from a walker he'd probably found at a thrift store. The boy, Elena learned from cross-referencing building security logs with Marcus's employment file, was named Cameron, 8 years old. The file listed him as Marcus's son, with a note that Marcus had requested permission to bring him to work due to childcare constraints. HR had approved it under the condition that Cameron remained in designated areas and didn't interfere with work duties. What the file didn't mention was that Cameron had cerebral palsy, or that Marcus Webb was providing him with therapy that would cost hundreds of dollars per session if done through official channels, or that Marcus was clearly a trained medical professional who'd somehow ended up pushing a mop for $15 an hour. Elena pulled up Marcus's employment application. The work history section was sparse. Previous job, caregiver at Sunset Assisted Living. Before that, maintenance worker at Riverside Hospital. Before that, nothing for 2 years. And before that gap, one line that made Elena's breath catch. Position, pediatric neurologist, Children's Medical Center of Boston. Years of service, 12. She stared at that line. Then she pulled up her web browser and searched. Dr. Marcus Webb, Pediatric Neurology, Boston. The results flooded her screen. Articles about innovative treatment approaches for childhood movement disorders. A profile in a medical journal about his work with cerebral palsy patients. A news story from 4 years ago about a fundraiser he'd organized for families dealing with neurological conditions. And then, 3 years ago, the articles stopped. Elena searched deeper. She found an obituary. Rebecca Webb, beloved wife of Marcus Webb, devoted mother to Cameron, lost her courageous battle with ovarian cancer. She was 34. The timeline clicked into place. Marcus had been a successful neurologist in Boston. His wife had gotten sick. He'd cared for her while raising a son with special needs. The medical bills had probably consumed everything. When Rebecca died, he'd been left with nothing but a child who required expensive ongoing care and a resume that couldn't explain a 2-year gap. So he'd taken the first job he could get. And he'd been using his medical expertise in secret at 3 in the morning because it was the only way he could afford to give his son the therapy he needed. Elena closed the browser. She sat in the dark of her office, the city lights casting long shadows across her desk. She should have felt vindicated. She'd been right that something was happening after hours. She could write up a violation report, using company facilities for personal purposes, bringing an unauthorized minor into the building outside approved hours. She could fire Marcus Webb and replace him with someone who'd clean the bathrooms and nothing more. But the thought of doing that made her physically ill, because 3 years ago Elena had been the parent researching treatments at 2 in the morning. She'd been the one calling specialists across the country, begging for appointments. She'd been the one doing exercises with Sophia that made her daughter cry, but might, maybe possibly, give her a few more months of mobility, of life. And she remembered with painful clarity how it felt when doctors talked about costs, when insurance denied claims, when the gap between what your child needed and what you could provide felt like a chasm you'd never cross. Marcus Webb was living in that chasm, and he was fighting his way across it, one 3 a.m. therapy session at a time. Elena made a decision then that surprised her. She wouldn't fire him. She wouldn't even confront him. But she would watch. She would understand. And maybe, just maybe, she would figure out what she was supposed to do with the information that had just blown apart her carefully constructed emotional distance. She closed the security footage, shut down her computer, left her office at 3:42 in the morning, riding the elevator down to the parking garage where her Tesla waited in its reserved spot. But instead of going home, Elena found herself taking the stairs, up 2 flights to the 40th floor where the executive gym was located. She told herself she was just checking something, verifying what she'd seen on the footage, making sure there was no damage to company property, the lies we tell ourselves in moments of decision. She reached the gym at 3:58. Through the frosted glass doors, she could see movement. She pushed the door open silently, and there, exactly as the footage had shown, was Marcus Webb. He was supporting Cameron in a standing position at the parallel bars. The boy's legs were trembling with effort, his small face scrunched in concentration. Marcus stood behind him, hands on his hips, for stability, counting softly. 8, 9, 10. You're doing great, buddy. Just 5 more seconds. I know it hurts. I know. But you're so strong. The strongest kid I know. Cameron's legs gave out at 14 seconds. Marcus caught him smoothly, lowering him to the mat with practiced ease. Good job, Cameron. That's 2 seconds longer than yesterday. Do you know what that means? Cameron's voice was slurred but understandable. Progress? That's right. Progress. Marcus pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote something down. Tomorrow we'll try for 16 seconds, but right now, water break. He helped Cameron to a sitting position, handed him a water bottle, and only then did he notice Elena standing in the doorway. Marcus froze. His entire body went rigid. His face, which had been open and warm while working with his son, closed down into the careful blankness of someone expecting the worst. "Miss Vasquez," he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with an accent that spoke of education and refinement. "I can explain." Elena stood there, her red suit jacket still buttoned, her heels clicking against the gym floor as she walked closer. She should have been angry, should have been cold, should have been the CEO who'd fire someone for policy violations without hesitation. But all she could see was Cameron's small face, looking up at her with fear. The same fear Sophia used to have when doctors walked into the room with bad news. "How long have you been doing this?" Elena asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. 18 months, since I started working here. "I'm not stealing anything. I bring my own equipment. I clean up completely. The gym is exactly as I found it." I understand if you need to terminate my employment, but please just give me 2 weeks to find another position. Cameron needs his therapy. I can't afford to miss sessions while I'm unemployed." Elena looked at the makeshift standing frame, at the carefully arranged resistance bands, at the notebook filled with what she could now see were detailed therapy notes complete with measurements and progress tracking. "You were a pediatric neurologist," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, at Children's Medical Center in Boston, before my wife got sick. And now you clean offices. Now I take care of my son. The job is just how I pay for it." Cameron was watching them both, his water bottle forgotten in his hands. His legs were still in the AFO braces. His small body was clearly exhausted from the therapy session. Elena crouched down so she was at Cameron's eye level. She hadn't been this close to a child in 3 years. The proximity hurt like a physical wound. "Hi, Cameron," she said softly. "I'm Elena. This is my building." Cameron looked at his father, then back at Elena. "Are you going to fire my dad?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Elena felt something crack deep in her chest. The ice that had kept her frozen for 3 years developed a fissure. "No," she said, "I'm not going to fire your dad." Marcus exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping an inch. "But we need to talk," Elena continued, standing and looking at Marcus. "Not right now. Cameron needs to rest. But tomorrow," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Tomorrow I'd like to understand what you're doing here, professionally speaking." Marcus nodded slowly. "Of course, whatever you need." Elena turned to leave, then stopped at the door. She didn't turn around when she spoke. Her voice was so quiet, Marcus almost missed it. "My daughter had cerebral palsy, too. She was 6 when she died. You're doing everything right. Keep doing it." Then she walked out, letting the door close softly behind her, leaving Marcus Webb staring after her with an expression of shock that would have been comical in any other circumstance. Elena made it to her car before the tears came. She sat in the driver's seat of her Tesla, hands gripping the steering wheel, and cried for the first time in 3 years. Huge, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for Sophia, for Marcus, for Cameron, for every parent who'd ever had to watch their child struggle and known that love alone wasn't enough to fix it. She cried until there were no tears left. Then she drove home as dawn broke over the city, washing it in shades of pink and gold that felt like a promise she wasn't ready to believe in yet. But something had shifted. The security footage at 3 a.m. had shown her more than a janitor doing physical therapy. It had shown her what she'd lost when she sealed herself off from feeling. It had shown her that some things were worth the risk of pain. And it had shown her that Marcus Webb, the man she'd barely noticed for 18 months, was someone she needed to know. Not as an employee, not as a policy violation waiting to happen, but as a human being who'd walked through fire and come out carrying his child on his back. She didn't know what would happen next, didn't know if she was strong enough to let herself care again. But as she pulled into her parking space and took the elevator up to her empty apartment, Elena Vasquez made a decision. She would show up tomorrow, she would listen to Marcus's story, and she would figure out if there was anything she could do to help a man who'd sacrificed everything for his son. Because maybe, just maybe, helping someone else put their broken pieces back together would teach her how to fix her own. Elena didn't sleep. She stood in her apartment as sunrise painted her floor-to-ceiling windows gold, still wearing yesterday's suit, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt anything besides the dull ache of purposeful numbness. Her reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar. Mascara smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes, hair falling from its normally perfect style, the CEO armor cracked just enough to show the woman underneath. She should have been exhausted, should have gone to bed. Instead, she found herself pulling out a box from the back of her closet, the one she'd packed 3 years ago and never opened. Inside were Sophia's medical records, therapy schedules, progress notes written in Elena's own handwriting, documenting every millimeter of improvement, every setback, every small victory that felt enormous at the time. She spread them across her dining table and really read them for the first time since Sophia's death. And as she did, she realized something that made her chest tight with regret. She'd been a good mother. She'd fought hard. She'd done everything humanly possible. The outcome wasn't her fault, but she'd spent 3 years punishing herself anyway, punishing everyone around her, building walls so high that nothing could hurt her again, but nothing could reach her either. Marcus Webb was still fighting that fight, still in the trenches, still believing that love and dedication and 3 a.m. therapy sessions could make a difference. And maybe they would. Maybe Cameron would beat the odds. Or maybe he wouldn't. But Marcus would never have to live with the regret of not trying hard enough, of not showing up, of choosing safety over love. Elena made coffee as the city woke up around her. She showered, dressed in a softer outfit than usual, a cream blouse instead of her usual red power suit, and arrived at Vasquez Technologies at 7:30, 2 hours earlier than normal. She went straight to HR and pulled Marcus Webb's complete file. Then she did something she'd never done before. She used her access to look at his payroll records. $15 an hour, 30 hours a week. After taxes, he was taking home maybe $1,600 a month. She pulled up rental listings in the area. The cheapest studio apartment started at $1,200. That left $400 for food, utilities, medical supplies, everything else. And Cameron needed specialized equipment, AFO braces that had to be replaced as he grew, medications, doctor visits, physical therapy that Marcus was providing himself because he couldn't afford the $200 per session it would cost otherwise. The math was impossible. Marcus Webb was drowning financially, and he was doing it silently, invisibly, without complaint. He showed up every night at 2:45 a.m. and worked until 4:15 with his son on his back, literally and figuratively, and Elena had barely noticed he existed. She closed the files, opened her computer, started typing an email, stopped, deleted it, started again. She went through 6 drafts before she finally sent a simple message to Marcus's work email. Subject: meeting request. Marcus, please come to my office today at 5 p.m. This is not disciplinary. I want to discuss Cameron's therapy and how the company might be able to help. Elena Vasquez. She read it 3 times before hitting send. Then she spent the entire day distracted, checking her email obsessively for a response that didn't come until 3:47 p.m. Miss Vasquez, I'll be there. Thank you for not firing me. Marcus. The vulnerability in those 7 words made Elena's throat tight. At exactly 5 p.m., there was a knock on her office door. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway wearing his janitor's uniform, his work boots worn but clean, his posture careful. He looked like a man preparing for bad news. Come in, Elena said. Please sit. Marcus sat on the edge of the chair across from her desk, his hands clasped in his lap. Up close, in better light, Elena could see more details. The gray threading through his dark hair, though he couldn't be older than early 40s. The exhaustion etched around his eyes. The strength in his shoulders that came from carrying a 40-pound child for hours every day. I owe you an explanation, Marcus began. Elena held up a hand. Actually, I owe you an apology. I've had you working in my building for 18 months, and I never once asked about your life. Never noticed you were struggling. Never saw you as anything more than a function. That was wrong. Marcus blinked, clearly surprised. You run a billion-dollar company. I'm not expecting the CEO to know the janitor's life story. Maybe that's part of the problem. Elena leaned forward. I looked at your background. You were a pediatric neurologist, published researcher, by all accounts, one of the best in your field. What happened? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but his eyes were distant. My wife, Rebecca, was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer when Cameron was 3. He already had cerebral palsy from birth complications. She'd been his primary caregiver while I worked. When she got sick, I took a leave of absence to care for them both. He paused. The medical bills came fast. Rebecca's treatment, Cameron's therapy. I burned through our savings in 6 months, sold our house, moved to a smaller place, then a smaller place. I went back to work part-time, but I couldn't maintain my practice while being the parent Cameron needed. And Rebecca needed. His hands tightened in his lap. She died 2 years after diagnosis. I was left with $60,000 in medical debt, a son who needed constant care, and a resume that couldn't explain why I'd walked away from a 6-figure salary. No hospital would hire me back after a 2-year gap. Insurance wouldn't cover me because of the debt. So I took the first job I could get that paid weekly and didn't ask too many questions. Elena felt the story like physical blows. She'd lived a version of it. She knew exactly how medical bills could devour a family, how hope could be measured in dollars you didn't have. Cameron's therapy, Elena said quietly. How often does he need it? Daily. Marcus met her eyes. He needs at least an hour of physical therapy every day to maintain mobility, to have any chance of improving. The specialists recommended 2 hours. I do what I can in the time I have. And you're using the gym here because you can't afford a clinic. I can't afford anything, Marcus said bluntly. After rent and food, there's nothing left. I've applied for assistance programs, but there are wait lists. Months long. Years long. Cameron can't wait that long. Every day without therapy is regression, so I do it myself. I still remember how. I still have the knowledge. I just don't have the credentials anymore, or the equipment, or the time. The weight of his words settled between them. Elena had spent 3 years telling herself that money didn't matter, that her wealth hadn't saved Sophia, so what good was it? But looking at Marcus, seeing what he could do for his son if he just had resources, she realized how wrong she'd been. Money mattered, not because it bought happiness, but because it bought options, time, help, the difference between giving up and keeping going. I want to help, Elena said, but I need to do it right, not as charity, as something you can accept without it feeling like pity. Marcus's jaw tightened. Missy Vasquez, I appreciate the thought, but I don't need rescue. I'm managing. You're drowning. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. I've seen the numbers. Your salary barely covers rent. You're working yourself to exhaustion, and Cameron deserves better than therapy sessions at 3 a.m. in a corporate gym. What do you suggest? Marcus's tone had an edge now. You're going to wave a magic wand and fix everything? Make me a doctor again? Give Cameron new legs? Some things can't be fixed with money. No, but some things can be helped. Elena pulled out a folder she'd prepared. Vasquez Technologies has a family support program, enhanced medical coverage, child care assistance, flexible scheduling. I want to move you from night custodial to a facilities management position. 40 hours a week, salary, full benefits. Your son would be covered under our health care plan, which includes physical therapy coverage. Marcus stared at her. That's not a real position. It is now. We need someone to oversee building maintenance, coordinate with contractors, manage equipment. It's not neurology, but it uses your brain instead of just your back. And the hours are 9 to 5, which means Cameron can be in school during the day and with you at night. Why would you do this? Marcus's voice was suspicious. You don't even know me. Elena took a breath. Because 3 years ago, I was you. My daughter Sophia had cerebral palsy. I did everything you're doing, the research, the therapy, the desperation, the math that never added up. I had money and it still wasn't enough. She died anyway. Her voice cracked on the last word. She pushed through. But you still have Cameron. He's still fighting. And I have resources I'm not using. Let me help. Not because you need rescue, but because maybe helping you will help me remember what it felt like to believe in something besides quarterly earnings. Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. If I accept this, it can't be charity. It has to be real, a real job, real expectations. I won't be your project or your therapy. Agreed. Elena met his eyes. You work, you earn it, but Cameron gets the care he needs. And maybe you get some sleep. Marcus closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. When do I start? Monday. Elena handed him the folder. HR will process the paperwork. You'll get your first paycheck at the end of next week. Health insurance kicks in immediately. I've already had Patricia schedule Cameron with the best pediatric physical therapist in the city, Dr. Sarah Chen. She worked with Sophia. She's expensive, but she's worth it. The company plan covers it. Marcus looked at the papers in his hands like they might disappear. I don't know what to say. Say you'll show up Monday. And Marcus, she paused, this isn't me being a saint. This is me being selfish. Watching you with Cameron last night reminded me what it looks like to fight for someone. I forgot. I need to remember. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena watched Marcus Webb transform, not in obvious ways. He still moved through the building with the same quiet efficiency, still stepped aside when executives passed, still kept his head down in that way invisible people learn. But there were small changes. The exhaustion around his eyes faded slightly. He started arriving at 8:30 instead of 2:45 a.m. Cameron started therapy sessions with Dr. Chen 3 times a week. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Elena found herself checking in more than was professionally necessary. She'd stop by Marcus's new office, a small space on the 20th floor, to ask about Cameron's progress. Marcus would show her the therapy notes Dr. Chen sent. They'd talk about mobility goals and equipment needs and small victories that only people who'd lived this life would understand. One afternoon, 2 weeks into Marcus's new position, Elena found him in the building's physical therapy room. Yes, Vasquez Technologies had a therapy room. Elena had installed it 3 years ago and never used it, never even looked at it. But now Marcus was there with Cameron, working through exercises while Dr. Chen observed and made notes. Elena stood in the doorway, watching. Cameron was on a therapy mat, trying to hold a plank position while Marcus counted. His small body shook with effort. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he held it. 10 seconds, 15, 20. Excellent, Dr. Chen said warmly. That's 10 seconds longer than last week. You're getting so strong, Cameron. Cameron collapsed onto the mat, breathing hard but smiling. Did you see, Dad? Did you see? I saw, buddy. Marcus pulled him into a hug. I'm so proud of you. That's when Cameron noticed Elena. His face lit up. Miss Elena, did you see? I held it for 20 seconds. I saw. Elena walked closer, crouching down. That was amazing. Dad says you have a therapy room here because of your daughter. Cameron's voice was innocent, curious, the way children ask questions without understanding weight. Did she like therapy? The question should have hurt, should have sent Elena running, but somehow it didn't. She looked at Cameron's open face, at Marcus's protective expression, and answered honestly. No, she didn't like it. It hurt and she was tired, a lot. But she did it anyway because she was brave. Like you. Was she good at it? She was the best at it. Elena felt tears prick her eyes but didn't look away. And I think she'd be happy that you're using her room now, getting strong in the space she used to use. Cameron processed this with the seriousness of a child who'd spent his whole life in medical settings. "Can I see her picture sometime?" Elena glanced at Marcus, who looked uncertain. Then she nodded. "Yes, I'd like that." That evening, Elena did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She went home and looked through photo albums, found pictures of Sophia smiling despite the braces, playing despite the wheelchair, living despite everything. She selected one, a photo of Sophia at 5, wearing a purple dress and grinning at the camera with gap-toothed joy, and had it printed and framed. The next day, she brought it to the therapy room and hung it on the wall. A small brass plaque underneath read, "Sophia's room, for warriors who fight every day." When Cameron saw it, he wheeled his walker over and studied the picture carefully. "She looks nice," he said. "She was," Elena replied. "Very nice. I'll work hard in her room." Cameron's voice was solemn, with the kind of promise only children make. To honor her. Elena had to leave then, had to walk quickly to the bathroom where she cried quietly in a stall. But they were different tears than before. Not the hollow tears of grief that consumed everything. These were tears of connection, of meaning, of slowly, carefully letting herself feel again. Marcus found her 15 minutes later, sitting on the floor of her office with her back against the wall, mascara ruined again. He didn't say anything, just sat down beside her. Two people who'd lost too much sitting in silence that somehow felt less empty than all the noise of the past 3 years. "Thank you," Elena finally said, "for letting me be part of Cameron's life." "Thank you for giving him a chance," Marcus replied, "and for giving me my dignity back. That job, this therapy, it's not just money. It's the difference between surviving and actually living." They sat there as the sun set through the office windows, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Neither of them noticed when their shoulders touched, or maybe they did notice and chose not to move away. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. It started with morning coffee. Marcus would arrive at 8:30, tired from getting Cameron ready and onto the school bus, and Elena would have coffee waiting in his office. Not from the executive kitchen, but made the way he liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. He never asked how she knew. Then it was lunch. Elena started taking her lunch break, something she hadn't done in years, and eating in the therapy room while Cameron had his sessions. She'd work on her laptop while Dr. Chen guided Cameron through exercises. Sometimes she'd help, holding Cameron's hand during balance work or counting repetitions. Marcus watched this with something like wonder. The Ice Queen CEO, the woman who'd fired people via email, sitting cross-legged on a therapy mat, encouraging an 8-year-old boy to take one more step. One afternoon, Marcus asked the question that had been building. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Elena set down her laptop. "Because when Sophia died, I decided feeling anything was too dangerous. I built walls so high nothing could get through, not pain, but not joy either, not loss, but not love. I was surviving, but I wasn't living." She looked at Cameron, who was using the parallel bars to practice standing. "You and Cameron reminded me what I was missing." "What's that?" "Purpose, connection, the feeling that what I do matters beyond stock prices and board meetings." Elena paused. "I was drowning in success and didn't even know it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I understand that more than you'd think. After Rebecca died, I was drowning in survival. Everything was about getting through one more day, one more bill, one more therapy session. I forgot there could be more than just enduring. And now I'm remembering." "Thank you." Their eyes met and held. Something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people who'd walked through fire and came out scarred but still standing. Two people who understood loss in ways most people never would. But the world outside their small bubble had started to notice the changes. The board of directors was watching. Richard Chen cornered Elena after a quarterly review meeting. "The staff is talking," he said without preamble. "About you and the janitor. His name is Marcus Webb," Elena corrected coldly, "and he's the facilities manager, not a janitor." "Fine. You and the facilities manager. You're spending a lot of time with him, with his son. There are concerns about favoritism, about appropriate boundaries." Elena felt her walls trying to snap back into place, the old instinct to protect herself through coldness, but she pushed it down. Marcus Webb is a former pediatric neurologist who sacrificed his career to care for his family. He's brilliant, dedicated, and exactly the kind of person this company should be supporting. If the board has concerns about me treating employees like human beings, then maybe we need to discuss what kind of company we actually want to be. Richard held up his hands. "I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to help. The board's already nervous about your leadership style. This looks like you're playing favorites." "I am playing favorites," Elena said bluntly. "I'm favoring someone who deserves it, someone who shows up every single day and fights for his son. If that's a problem, the board can vote me out. But while I'm CEO, I'm going to run this company with something besides cold calculation." She walked away before Richard could respond, but his words stayed with her. The board was watching. They'd been looking for reasons to question her leadership. This could give them ammunition. That evening she found Marcus in the therapy room after hours. Cameron was asleep in his wheelchair, exhausted from the day. Marcus was cleaning up equipment, moving quietly to not wake his son. "Can we talk?" Elena asked. Marcus looked up. "Of course." "Is something wrong?" Elena sat on the therapy mat. "The board is concerned. About us. About how much time I'm spending here. They think it looks inappropriate. Do you want me to quit?" Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. "No. God, no." Elena ran her hands through her hair. "I just need you to know that helping you might come with consequences. For me. And I need to know if you're okay with that." Marcus set down the resistance bands he was coiling. "Let me get this straight. You're asking if I'm okay with you potentially risking your position to help my son?" "Yes." Marcus crossed the room and sat beside her. "Elena, you've given us everything. A real job, healthcare, hope. If the board comes after you because of that, I'll testify at every meeting. I'll tell them exactly what kind of CEO you are. The kind who sees people, not numbers. The kind who remembers what matters. That might not be enough. Then we'll deal with it. Together." Marcus's voice was firm. "You've been showing up for Cameron for weeks now. Let me show up for you." Elena felt something warm bloom in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "Okay." Together, they sat in comfortable silence, watching Cameron sleep. The city lights flickered on outside the windows. Somewhere in the building, cleaning crews started their shifts. The world kept turning, but in Sophia's room, two broken people had found something they'd both thought was lost forever. A reason to keep fighting, not just for survival, but for something better, something worth the risk of feeling again. Marcus finally spoke, his voice soft. "You know what's funny? When I took this job 18 months ago, I told myself to stay invisible. Keep my head down, don't get noticed, don't make waves, just survive. And now? Now I'm sitting in a therapy room named after your daughter, working a job I actually care about, watching my son get stronger every day, and I'm talking to the CEO like she's a friend." He smiled slightly. "Visibility isn't as scary as I thought." Elena smiled back. "Neither is connection, turns out." They stayed there until Cameron woke up, groggy and confused about why Miss Elena was there. They ordered pizza and ate it sitting on therapy mats, talking about everything and nothing. Cameron told elaborate stories about his day at school. Marcus added embellishments that made them laugh. Elena found herself relaxing in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Around 8 p.m., Marcus gathered their things to head home. Elena walked them to the parking garage. "Thank you for dinner," Marcus said, "and for everything else. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know how else to express what this means." "You don't have to keep thanking me," Elena said. "Just keep showing up. Keep fighting for Cameron, that's all I need." Cameron, strapped into his wheelchair in the back of Marcus's ancient Honda, waved sleepily. "Bye, Miss Elena. See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow," Elena called back. She watched them drive away, Marcus's taillights disappearing into traffic. Then she went back to her office and worked until midnight, preparing a presentation for the board. Because if they wanted to challenge her leadership, she'd show them exactly what kind of leader she'd become. One who understood that the bottom line wasn't just about money. It was about building something that mattered, something that helped people like Marcus Webb get back on their feet, something that gave children like Cameron a fighting chance, something Sophia would have been proud of. Elena closed her laptop and looked at the framed photo on her desk, the one she'd finally brought from home, Sophia smiling in her purple dress. She touched the glass gently. "I think you'd like them, sweetheart," she whispered. "I think you'd want me to do this." The photo didn't answer, but Elena didn't need it to. She knew with a certainty she hadn't felt in years that she was finally doing something, right? The question was whether the board would see it the same way, or whether everything she'd built, both the company and this fragile new connection with Marcus and Cameron, was about to come crashing down. She'd find out soon enough. The board meeting was scheduled for next week, and Elena Vasquez had never backed down from a fight, especially not when she was fighting for something that actually mattered. The board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. Elena spent Monday night preparing her defense, but at 2 in the morning she received a call that changed everything. "Miss Vasquez, this is Memorial Hospital. We have Marcus Webb here. He listed you as an emergency contact. There's been an accident." Elena's blood turned to ice. "Is he okay? Is Cameron okay?" "Mr. Webb is stable. His son is in surgery. There was a car accident. The other driver ran a red light. Mr. Webb is asking for you." Elena was dressed and out the door in 4 minutes. She drove through empty streets with her hazard lights on, breaking every speed limit. The hospital was across town, a 25-minute drive she made in 12. She ran through the emergency room doors, still wearing pajama pants and a Vasquez Technology sweatshirt she'd grabbed from her closet. "Marcus Webb!" she gasped to the receptionist. "Where is he?" The nurse directed her to the 3rd floor. Elena took the stairs, her heart hammering. She found Marcus in a private waiting room, his head bandaged, his right arm in a sling. When he saw her, his face crumbled. "Elena, Cameron's in surgery. They said his hip is broken. There's internal bleeding. They don't know if..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Elena sat beside him and took his good hand. "Tell me everything." Marcus's voice was hollow. "We were driving home from therapy. Cameron had a great session. He was so happy, talking about how he'd walked 10 steps without help. Then this car just appeared. T-boned us on Cameron's side. I tried to swerve, but his voice broke. It should have been me. Why wasn't it me? Because you were driving. Because accidents are random and cruel and it's nobody's fault." Elena squeezed his hand. "What are the doctors saying?" "They're worried about his spine. The impact was right where his cerebral palsy already affects his mobility. If there's damage, if the surgery doesn't go well, he might never walk, not even with therapy, not even with all the progress he's made." Marcus pulled his hand away and stood, pacing the small room. 3 years, Elena. 3 years of working myself to death. 18 months of secret therapy sessions at 3 in the morning. 5 weeks of real treatment with Dr. Chen. 5 weeks where Cameron was actually getting better. And now some drunk driver might have taken it all away in 5 seconds. Elena watched him fall apart, this man who'd been so strong, so steady. She understood the rage, the helplessness, the bargaining with a universe that didn't listen. I called my insurance, Marcus continued, his voice rising. Our new insurance, the one you gave us. And you know what they said? Cameron's surgery isn't covered. It's classified as pre-existing condition complications. They'll cover the emergency care, but not the reconstructive work he'll need. Not the extended physical therapy afterward. Not any of it. That can't be right. I specifically chose a plan that covered everything. They have clauses, limitations, fine print. Marcus laughed bitterly. It always comes down to fine print, doesn't it? I thought we were safe. I thought finally we had a chance. But we're right back where we started, except now Cameron's hurt worse and I can't even do the therapy myself because I don't have access to surgical tools. How much? Elena asked quietly. What? How much is the surgery? The therapy afterward? All of it? Marcus stopped pacing. The surgeon estimated between $80,000 and $100,000, plus ongoing care. Maybe another $50,000 over the next year. Elena, I don't have that. Even with my new salary, I couldn't save that much in 5 years. They want a $30,000 deposit before they'll even schedule the reconstructive surgery. Then I'll pay it. Marcus stared at her. No, absolutely not. Yes, absolutely yes. Elena stood to face him. Marcus, this isn't charity. This isn't pity. This is me using resources I have to help someone I care about. Please let me do this. I can't take that much money from you. It's too much. It would make me, he struggled for the word, obligated, dependent. I just got my dignity back. I can't lose it again. Your dignity isn't defined by debt, Elena said firmly. It's defined by how you show up for your son, by how you've fought for him every single day for 8 years. Taking help when you need it doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. The door opened. A surgeon in blue scrubs entered, looking exhausted. Mr. Webb, Cameron's out of surgery. He's stable. Marcus grabbed the doctor's arm. His spine, his legs, the hip is repaired. We found the internal bleeding and stopped it. But there was impact trauma to his lumbar spine. We won't know the full extent until the swelling goes down. It could be temporary. It could be permanent. I'm sorry I can't give you more certainty right now. When can I see him? He's in recovery. Another hour. The surgeon paused. Mr. Webb, I need to discuss payment options. The surgery and hospital stay will be significant. We'll need to arrange. Send the bills to me. Elena interrupted. All of them. She handed the doctor her business card. I'm covering Cameron's care. The surgeon looked between them. Miss Vasquez, I need to verify this with billing. Are you family? I'm the person paying, Elena said flatly. That's all billing needs to know. The surgeon left. Marcus sank into a chair, his face in his hands. I can't let you do this. You can't stop me. Elena sat beside him. Marcus, I have money I'll never spend. A penthouse I barely live in. Stock options worth millions that sit in accounts I don't look at. What's the point of having it if I can't use it for something that matters? It matters to me that I can take care of my son myself. Then think of it as a loan. Pay me back over 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. I don't care. Elena's voice softened. But right now, tonight, let me help Cameron, please. Marcus looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Why? Why do you care this much? Because 3 years ago, I would have given anything for someone to show up for Sophia the way I'm trying to show up for Cameron. Because watching you love your son reminded me what unconditional love looks like. And because, she paused, choosing her words carefully, you and Cameron have become important to me. More important than quarterly earnings or board approval or any of the things I thought mattered. They sat in silence. Then Marcus nodded slowly, a single tear tracking down his face. Okay, thank you. They waited together for the hour to pass. Elena called Patricia and told her to cancel the day's meetings. She called the hospital billing department and arranged for all charges to go to her personal account. She called Dr. Chen and explained the situation, asking her to coordinate with Cameron's surgical team. At 4 a.m., they were allowed into recovery. Cameron lay in a hospital bed that made him look impossibly small. Machines beeped steadily. IV lines ran into his arm. His eyes were closed, his face pale against the white pillows. Marcus went to his side immediately, taking his small hand. "Hey, buddy, Dad's here. You're okay. You're going to be okay." Cameron's eyes fluttered open. "Dad?" His voice was slurred from anesthesia. "Right here, sweetheart. Does it hurt? The doctors gave you medicine for the pain. You're safe now." Cameron's gaze drifted to Elena, standing at the foot of the bed. "Miss Elena came too?" "Of course I came," Elena said, moving closer. "We're both here. Did we crash?" "Yes, but you were very brave. The bravest kid I know." Cameron's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, I can't feel my legs." "Why can't I feel my legs?" Marcus's face went white. Elena stepped in quickly. "That's from the medicine and the swelling, Cameron. The doctors said it might take time for the feeling to come back. But you're strong, remember? You held that plank for 20 seconds. You walked 10 steps without help. You're a warrior." "Like Sophia?" Cameron asked. "Just like Sophia," Elena confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. Cameron's eyes drifted closed again. When he spoke, his words were barely audible. "Tell her I'm still fighting. Tell her I'm not giving up." Elena had to leave the room. She made it to the hallway before the sobs came. She leaned against the wall, crying for Cameron, for Marcus, for Sophia, for every child who had to fight battles they never asked for. Marcus found her 10 minutes later. He looked as wrecked as she felt. "The board meeting is in 6 hours," he said quietly. "I'm not going." "Elena, you have to. They're already looking for reasons. To remove you. If you don't show up, they'll use it against you." "Let them," Elena said fiercely. "I'm staying with Cameron. The board can wait." "No," Marcus's voice was firm. "You go. You fight for what you've built. Cameron and I will be here when you're done. But don't throw away everything because of us." "Marcus." "Elena, you gave us a chance at a real life. Don't let them take away what you've built. Go to the meeting, defend yourself, show them the CEO who actually gives a damn about people. Then come back. We'll still be here." Elena wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in his face and realized he was right. She had to face the board, had to fight for the kind of company she was building, the kind that treated people like Marcus and Cameron as valuable, not expendable. "I'll come back," she promised, "as soon as it's done." She went home, showered, changed into her red power suit. But when she looked in the mirror, the armor felt different now, not a shield to hide behind, but a uniform for battle. She was fighting for something that mattered. That changed everything. The boardroom was full when Elena arrived at 9:55. Richard Chen sat at the head of the table, flanked by the other 8 board members. Their faces were carefully neutral, but Elena could read the room. This was an ambush. She sat in her usual chair and waited. Richard cleared his throat. "Elena, thank you for coming. We need to discuss concerns that have been raised about your leadership over the past several weeks." "I'm aware of the concerns," Elena said calmly. "I'm prepared to address them." For the next hour, they dissected her decisions. The money spent on the therapy room, the position created for Marcus, the time she spent with Cameron, the insurance coverage that had somehow been enhanced beyond standard policy. They had done their research. They had numbers, timelines, documentation. Elena listened without interrupting. When they finished, Richard leaned forward. "So, Elena, how do you explain these decisions? How do you justify using company resources for what appears to be a personal relationship. Elena stood. She walked to the window, looking out at the city waking up below. Then she turned to face them. 3 years ago, my 6-year-old daughter died of cerebral palsy. I spent 2 years fighting for her life. I exhausted every option. I became an expert in pediatric neurology out of desperation. And when she died, I told myself that caring was the problem. That if I just stopped feeling, stopped connecting, I could avoid that pain forever. She paused. So I built walls. I became the CEO you wanted. Cold, efficient, ruthless. I made this company profitable by treating people like numbers. And I was miserable. Completely, utterly miserable. But I thought that was the price of success. Then I saw Marcus Webb at 3 a.m. doing physical therapy with his son in our gym. And I remembered what it looked like to fight for someone, to sacrifice everything, for the chance that tomorrow might be better than today. He reminded me that people aren't numbers. They're humans with stories and struggles and dignity that has nothing to do with their job titles. Richard interrupted. That's very touching, Elena, but it doesn't justify the financial decisions, doesn't it? Elena faced him directly. Marcus Webb is a former pediatric neurologist, one of the best in his field. He's brilliant, dedicated, and exactly the kind of person any company should want. I didn't give him a position out of charity. I gave it to him because he earned it, because his expertise is valuable. As for the therapy room, we've started offering it to all employees with children who need physical therapy. 3 families are already using it. Employee retention in those departments has increased by 40%. Productivity is up. Healthcare costs are actually down because people are getting preventive care. She pulled out a folder she'd prepared. Here are the numbers, the return on investment for treating employees like humans instead of assets. You want to question my leadership? Question this. We're more profitable than ever. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. We're being recognized as one of the best places to work in the city. But more than that, she continued, her voice gaining strength, we're building something that matters. A company where people like Marcus Webb can rebuild their lives, where children like Cameron can get the care they need, where success isn't measured only in stock prices, but in actual human impact. The room was silent. Then Franklin Buxton, the oldest board member, spoke. He'd been quiet throughout the meeting, watching. Elena, what happened to Marcus's son? Elena's composure cracked slightly. He was in a car accident last night. He's in the hospital. His surgery isn't covered by insurance despite our enhanced plan. I'm covering his medical costs personally, which is my right, as it's my money. How much? Franklin asked. Probably $150,000 total. And you're willing to pay that? Elena met his eyes without hesitation. Franklin nodded slowly. You know what I see when I look at these numbers? I see a CEO who finally remembered that companies are made of people, that profit built on human suffering isn't sustainable, that the best investment we can make is in loyalty, dignity, and giving people a chance to thrive. He turned to the other board members. I move that we officially expand the family support program Elena has informally started, that we make it policy, not exception, and that we stop questioning a CEO who's actually building something with soul. Richard Chen's face darkened. Frank, we can't set precedent that. We already have, Franklin interrupted. The question is whether we're going to embrace it or fight it. I know which side I'm on. The vote was closer than Elena hoped, 5-4 in her favor, but it was enough. She'd kept her position, and more. Importantly, she'd won the right to build the kind of company she believed in. She left the meeting and drove straight back to the hospital. It was just after 1 p.m. She found Marcus in Cameron's room, reading to him from a book about dragons and knights. How'd it go? Marcus asked. Elena smiled. We won. We. Elena sat in the chair beside Cameron's bed. The board approved expanding the family support program. It's official company policy now, and I kept my job, which means you're stuck with me. Cameron, more alert now, grinned weakly. Good, because Dad says you're part of our family now. Elena felt her throat tighten. Cameron, I would be honored to be part of your family. The next 3 weeks were hard. Cameron's feelings slowly returned to his legs, but the damage was significant. He'd lost much of the mobility he'd gained. Dr. Chen was cautiously optimistic that with intensive therapy, he could recover most of it. But it would take time, months, maybe years. Elena showed up every day. Sometimes she worked from the hospital, laptop balanced on her knees while Cameron slept. Sometimes she helped with therapy, learning the exercises from Dr. Chen and practicing them with Cameron when Marcus needed to rest. Sometimes she just sat with them, 3 people who'd found each other in brokenness and were slowly building something whole. One evening, 6 weeks after the accident, Elena found Marcus alone in the therapy room at Vasquez Technologies. Cameron was spending the night at a friend's house, his first sleepover since the accident. Marcus was cleaning equipment, his movements automatic. He's doing better, Elena said from the doorway. Marcus looked up. Yeah, he is, thanks to you. The surgery, the therapy, all of it. We'd be drowning without you. You'd find a way. You always do. Maybe. Marcus set down the resistance bands, but it would have cost Cameron years of progress. You gave us time, space to heal. That's everything. Elena walked into the room, standing beside him. You know what you gave me? You reminded me how to feel again, how to connect, how to show up for someone besides myself. I spent 3 years in a tomb of my own making. You pulled me out. So we saved each other? Elena smiled. Yeah, I think we did. Marcus turned to face her fully. Elena, I need to say something, and I need you to hear it, really hear it. These past 2 months watching you with Cameron, seeing you fight for us, it's changed something. You're not just the CEO who gave me a job. You're not just the woman who saved my son. You're the person I think about when I wake up. The one I want to tell when Cameron does something amazing. The one who makes everything feel less heavy. He paused. I know the timing is terrible. I know there are 1,000 reasons this is complicated, but I need you to know that you matter to me, not because of what you've done for us, but because of who you are. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Marcus, I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in. How to risk caring that much again. You don't have to know. We can figure it out together, one day at a time. Marcus reached for her hand. The same way we've been doing everything else. Elena looked at their joined hands, then at his face, open and honest and patient. She thought about Sophia, about the life she'd built after loss, about whether her daughter would want her to stay frozen forever, or to take the risk of loving again. One day at a time, she repeated, I think I can do that. Marcus pulled her into a hug. She let herself lean into it, let herself feel safe in someone's arms for the first time in years. They stood there in Sophia's room, surrounded by equipment meant for warriors who fought every day and chose to be brave. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning, Elena and Marcus took Cameron to the park. He was using a walker, but he was walking. Slowly, carefully, but walking. They'd celebrated each step like a miracle because that's what they were. Cameron spotted the swings and insisted on trying. Marcus lifted him onto the seat, standing close to catch him if he slipped. Elena pushed gently, laughing as Cameron whooped with joy. Higher, Miss Elena, higher! She pushed harder, watching him soar. The morning sun painted everything gold. Parents and children filled the playground, normal people living normal lives. And for the first time in 3 years, Elena felt like she was part of that normalcy, like she belonged to the world again instead of just observing it from behind glass. Marcus caught her eye and smiled. Thank you. he mouthed. Elena smiled back. No, thank you. Cameron jumped off the swing mid-arc, landing perfectly on his feet. The 6 months of therapy, the countless hours of work, all of it came together in that one perfect moment. He threw his arms up in victory. Dad, Miss Elena, did you see? I flew. We saw, Marcus said, pulling him into a hug. You absolutely flew. Elena joined the hug, wrapping her arms around both of them, and as she stood there, holding the two people who'd taught her how to be human again, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope that begs for miracles, but the steady, grounded hope that comes from showing up, from fighting for what matters, from choosing connection over safety. She thought about Sophia, about whether her daughter would approve of this strange, beautiful family they'd created, and she knew with certainty that Sophia would love them, would want Elena to be happy, would understand that loving Cameron didn't mean forgetting her. It meant honoring her by living fully, by taking the lessons learned in those hospital rooms and using them to help another child thrive. They got ice cream. Cameron ordered chocolate chip with rainbow sprinkles. Marcus got vanilla. Elena got strawberry, Sophia's favorite, and didn't cry when she realized it. They sat on a park bench, 3 people who'd found each other at 3 in the morning in the most unlikely place. A CEO who'd learned that wealth meant nothing without purpose. A father who'd learned that accepting help didn't make him weak. A child who'd learned that he was worth fighting for, worth showing up for, worth all the effort and love and sacrifice. What do you want to do next? Marcus asked Cameron. Everything, Cameron said with the absolute certainty of a child who'd fought hard for every small freedom. I want to do everything. Then we'll do everything, Elena promised, one step at a time. As they walked through the park, Cameron between them, holding both their hands, Elena felt the weight she'd carried for 3 years finally lift. She wasn't the Ice Queen CEO anymore. She wasn't the grieving mother frozen in time. She was just Elena, a woman who'd lost and found and learned and grown, a woman who'd discovered that the bravest thing she could do was let herself care again. The security footage at 3 a.m. had shown her a janitor doing physical therapy with his son. But what it had really shown her was a mirror, a reflection of the parent she used to be, the fighter she'd buried, the human being she'd forgotten how to be. And in remembering, she'd found something better than the success she'd built. She'd found a family, not the one she'd lost, but a new one, cobbled together from broken pieces and late-night conversations and shared understanding of what it meant to love someone enough to keep fighting. Cameron ran ahead, his walker abandoned on the bench. He wasn't supposed to run yet, but he was 8 years old, and the morning was beautiful, and sometimes rules mattered less than joy. Should we stop him? Elena asked. Marcus watched his son, a smile playing at his lips. No. Let him fly, so they did. They let him run and stumble and laugh, and be exactly what he was, a child, a warrior, a miracle built from medicine and therapy and love and hope and the determination of people who refused to give up. And behind him, walking hand in hand, were 2 adults who'd learned that sometimes the best things in life came from the moments when you were brave enough to look at security footage at 3 in the morning, brave enough to see past job titles and assumptions, brave enough to care. 3 in the morning had exposed a truth that daylight had hidden, but now, in the full light of day, that truth had grown into something neither of them expected, something that looked a lot like happiness, like family, like home. Cameron turned back, the sun catching his hair. Come on, you're too slow. Elena and Marcus exchanged a look. Then they ran, catching up to the boy who'd taught them both what it meant to keep fighting, what it meant to hope, what it meant to love without reservation. And as they chased Cameron through the park, laughing like the family they'd become, Elena sent a silent thank you to the universe, to Sophia, to whatever had led her to check that security footage at 3 in the morning, because that one decision, that one moment of curiosity had changed everything, had saved 3 people who didn't even know they needed saving. And wasn't that the point of life? To show up, to see each other, to fight for what mattered, to build families from unexpected places and let love grow in the cracks of broken things. The security camera had shown her what she needed to see, but the real miracle was what happened after, when she chose to step through the door, when she chose to care, when she chose to be human again. That was the gift, not the therapy or the job or the money, but the choice to connect, to be vulnerable, to let herself be part of something bigger than quarterly reports and board meetings and the cold isolation of success. She'd watched security footage and seen a janitor, but what she'd really seen was herself, reflected in Marcus's dedication, in Cameron's fight, in the simple truth that some things mattered more than safety. And she'd chosen love, chosen family, chosen life, and that made all the difference. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.